Welcome to my YouTube channel, HEARDBREAK Chronicles, a place where you will hear a large number of fascinating and intriguing chronicles about hearts that are completely broken by female betrayal. Let's not drag on for long. Let's get straight to the point. I held my breath, my knuckles white as I gripped the doorframe. The scene before me felt surreal, like a bad dream on a loop I couldn't escape from. Across the room stood James, my best friend since college. His face frozen in shock, guilt written all over it. And standing beside him, calm and collected, was Sarah, my wife, my partner for the past 6 years. James opened his mouth, his voice trembling. "Matt, listen, man. It's not what you think." But I'd heard that line too many times before. Different day, different betrayal, same excuse. I tried everything. Confrontation, walking away, ignoring it, even begging for the day to end. But nothing worked. This was my last chance to break free, and this time, I had to expose the truth perfectly, or I'd be doomed to live through this nightmare again and again. Hi, my name is Matt Harrison, and I'm trapped in the worst day of my life. Sounds dramatic, right? I would have thought so too. But after reliving the same day dozens of times, I can tell you, nothing is more dramatic than watching your world fall apart over and over again. It all started on November 12th, our wedding anniversary. I woke up at 6:30 a.m., like always, with a plan to make the day special for Sarah. We'd been married for 6 years, and things had been complicated lately. We weren't arguing, but we weren't exactly clicking either. I figured a thoughtful anniversary surprise might be just what we needed. I made her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes, fresh orange juice, and a steaming cup of coffee with just the right amount of almond milk. I even wrote a sweet note. "Here's to forever, one day at a time." With the tray in hand, I headed back upstairs, quietly pushing open the bedroom door. I expected to find her still half asleep, maybe scrolling through Instagram. Instead, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, whispering into her phone with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. "Yeah, I'll see you soon," she said softly, her voice playful in a way that made my stomach twist. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light as I set the tray down. She flinched, quickly hanging up. "Oh, just Ashley from yoga," she said with a nervous laugh. She wanted to catch up later. It felt off, but I let it slide. Maybe I was being paranoid. That evening, we went to dinner at the Blue Orchid, a cozy little place downtown where we always celebrated special occasions. Sarah seemed distant, her eyes glued to her phone half the time. When I leaned over to peek at her screen, she quickly locked it. "Just work," she said with a shrug. "Nothing exciting." But it didn't feel like nothing. The first loop. The next morning, I woke up early again, still bothered by her behavior. I glanced at my phone, 6:30 a.m. on November 12th. I shook it off and went downstairs, ready to move on. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, I felt like I'd stepped into a movie I'd already seen. The same sunbeams streamed through the window. The same unopened bottle of orange juice sat on the counter. The same sound of Sarah's laughter floated down from upstairs. Exactly like the morning before. Déjà vu? Maybe. Until it happened again. I carried the tray upstairs, heart pounding. Sarah was sitting in the same spot, whispering into her phone just like the day before. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice more cautious this time. Her answer was exactly the same. "Ashley from yoga." The day unfolded like a script I'd already read. Same breakfast, same dinner, same excuses. By the time I went to bed, my skin was crawling with unease. The third morning, I woke up with dread gnawing at my stomach. November 12th. Again. This time, I decided to do things differently. I didn't make breakfast. I didn't follow the script. I listened closely, piecing together small clues. The phone calls, the sudden smiles, the excuses that didn't quite add up. By the end of the day, I discovered the first betrayal. Sarah wasn't meeting Ashley from yoga. She was meeting Jake, our neighbor, the guy who borrowed my lawnmower last summer and never returned it. The guy who'd always been a little too friendly. Confrontation and shock. I stormed over to Jake's house, my heart racing. He opened the door with a smile that quickly vanished when he saw my face. Matt, hey man. What's up? What's up? I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. You tell me, Jake. How long have you been sneaking around with Sarah? His eyes darted away, and in that moment, I knew. I clenched my fists, my mind spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? Was I blind? Or was this some sick joke the universe was playing on me? But before I could press him for answers, the world blurred. Everything went dark. And then, I woke up. The second loop. I gasped, sitting bolt upright in bed. The clock read 6:30 a.m. November 12th. No, I whispered, clutching my head. Not again. But it was. Every morning I woke up to the same nightmare. Each day I discovered a new betrayal. A new person Sarah had been hiding something with. Jake was just the beginning. The next day it was Eric, her colleague from work. Then it was Derek, our real estate agent. Every day a new betrayal. Every day a new lie. By the seventh loop, I wasn't just angry, I was determined. I had to figure out why this was happening and how to stop it. My plan was simple. Expose every lie, every betrayal, and find out who I could trust. If I failed, I'd be stuck in this endless cycle forever. But what I didn't realize was that the truth I was chasing was far more twisted than I ever imagined. Short spoiler introduction, peak tension. There I was, hiding behind the door to my own living room, holding my breath. My heart hammered in my chest as I listened to their conversation unfold in hushed, conspiratorial tones. Sarah's voice was calm, deliberate, and cold. You really think he's catching on? She whispered. I'm not sure, said Vanessa, her best friend of 10 years. But it doesn't matter. We'll stick to the plan. He'll never figure it out in time. They laughed softly, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. There was something bigger at play, something far more dangerous. And I had only one day, one shot to expose it all before the loop reset again. Part 2. The investigation begins. By the time I woke up on November 12th for the 10th time, I'd stopped feeling shocked. The initial confusion had been replaced by a burning desire to figure out what was really going on. If I was doomed to live this day over and over, I'd at least use it to my advantage. The plan was simple. Gather information. Identify who I could trust. Find out what Sarah was hiding. And most importantly, figure out how to escape the loop. On loop number 10, I started taking notes. I grabbed a notebook and wrote down every detail I could remember from the previous loops. Every conversation, every suspicious glance, every betrayal. The pattern was clear. Loop 1, Jake, our neighbor. Loop 2, Eric, her coworker. Loop 3, Derek, our real estate agent. Loop 4, Vanessa, her best friend. Yes, Vanessa, her best friend. That loop hit harder than the rest. Vanessa had been in our lives for years. She was practically family, always hanging out at our house, helping Sarah plan parties, even babysitting our niece once in a while. Couldn't believe it, but there it was, plain as day. I followed Sarah that morning, keeping a safe distance as she drove to a coffee shop downtown. I watched from across the street as she met Vanessa. They sat at a table by the window, leaning in close, their conversation animated and intense, eavesdropping on the truth. Desperate for answers, I slipped inside the cafe, grabbing a seat just close enough to hear them without being noticed. I ordered a coffee I didn't want and pretended to scroll through my phone while listening intently. Do you think Matt suspects anything? Vanessa asked, stirring her latte. Sarah sighed. I don't know. He's been acting different lately, more observant. If he finds out what we're doing, it'll ruin everything. Vanessa nodded. Then we need to stay a step ahead. He can't know about the plan. The plan. That word sent my thoughts spinning. This wasn't just a random betrayal, it was something deeper, something planned, something orchestrated. But what was the plan? What were they hiding from me? Confrontation attempt loop number 11. The next morning, I decided to confront Sarah directly. Enough games. Enough waiting. I was done playing detective. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. sharp, walked downstairs, and found her making coffee in the kitchen. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, my eyes locked on hers. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. She turned, startled. "What's wrong?" "You tell me," I said, stepping closer. "Who's Jake? Who's Eric? Why were you meeting Vanessa yesterday? Whispering about some plan?" Her face went pale. For a brief second, I thought I had her cornered. But then she laughed. A light, almost condescending laugh that made my blood boil. "Matt," she said, shaking her head, "you've been working too much. I think you need a break." She brushed past me like it was nothing, leaving me standing there, more confused than ever. The turning point, that's when it hit me. Confrontation wouldn't work. Not yet. She was too good at covering her tracks. If I wanted answers, I'd have to catch her red-handed, with undeniable proof. I spent the next few loops testing different approaches. Loop number 12. I followed her the entire day, noting every place she went, every person she talked to. Loop number 13. I tried recording our conversations, but the day reset before I could use the evidence. Loop number 14. I decided to play along, pretending everything was normal while gathering as much intel as possible. Each loop revealed something new, a piece of the puzzle falling into place. I learned that Sarah wasn't acting alone. There were others involved. Friends I'd known for years. People I trusted. The circle of betrayal widens. By loop number 15, the full extent of the betrayal began to surface. It wasn't just about affairs or secret rendezvous. This was something far bigger. I overheard a phone call between Sarah and Derek, our real estate agent. He mentioned moving the funds and covering their tracks. Another clue. Then, on loop number 16, I discovered an email on her laptop. A message from an unknown sender with the subject line, "Final instructions." It mentioned a transfer, a deadline, and something about my business accounts. Suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't just about emotional betrayal. Sarah and her circle were plotting something much worse. Something that could destroy me financially and leave me with nothing. The stakes were higher than I ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting to escape the loop. I was fighting to save my life, my career, everything I had built. But the deeper I dug, the more dangerous it became. I had to be smart. I had to be careful. And most of all, I had to find the perfect way to expose them without getting trapped again. The clock was ticking, and I was running out of loops. I pressed my phone tightly to my ear, my pulse racing as I heard Sarah's voice on the other end of the line. She had no idea I was listening to the most damning conversation yet. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice calm but urgent. "Yes," Derek answered. "All that's left is for him to sign the final papers. Once he does, the money's gone, and he won't know what hit him." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what those papers were. Documents I had been planning to sign that week, thinking they were just standard business forms. If I signed them, everything I owned would be transferred out of my control. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete takedown. And the worst part? Sarah and her co-conspirators had planned it perfectly. Except for one thing. They didn't expect me to have unlimited chances to stop them. Part 3. The plan unravels. I woke up on November 12th for the 17th time with a renewed sense of purpose. No more guessing. No more hesitation. This was war. The first thing I did was grab my notebook and write down every single detail from the past loops. Names, places, conversations, and most importantly, the timeline of Sarah's movements. I had a rough idea of when each betrayal occurred and who she would meet throughout the day. I wasn't going to confront her anymore. That had failed too many times. Instead, I was going to gather undeniable proof. Proof that would expose her and everyone involved once and for all. The surveillance strategy. My plan was simple but risky. I would follow Sarah all day, taking pictures, recording conversations, and collecting every shred of evidence I could find. At 7:30 a.m., she left the house like clockwork, claiming she had a yoga class. I knew exactly where she was going, to the coffee shop downtown to meet Vanessa. I parked across the street, camera in hand, and waited. They sat at the same table by the window, just like they had in previous loops. Their conversation was quiet, but I managed to get close enough to hear bits and pieces. "Once we move the funds, it's over," Vanessa said. "He'll never recover from this." Sarah nodded. "Good. He deserves it after everything." My stomach churned. What did she mean by everything? Uncovering the financial plot. I followed her for the rest of the day, tracking her to several locations. 10 a.m. A visit to Derek's office, where she handed him a thick envelope. 1:30 p.m. Lunch with Eric, her coworker, where they whispered about timing the final step. 4 p.m. A brief stop at the bank, where she signed some documents. Each stop confirmed what I already suspected. They were planning to drain my business accounts and leave me with nothing. The documents Sarah signed at the bank were likely forged with my name, authorizing the transfer of all my assets. I needed to get my hands on those documents. The failed heist, loop number 18. The next morning, I woke up determined to intercept the documents at the bank. I arrived before Sarah, waited near the entrance, and prepared to grab them before they could be processed. But it didn't go as planned. Just as Sarah walked into the bank, I slipped in behind her, trying to blend into the crowd. She handed the documents to the teller, and I made my move. "Excuse me," I said, flashing my best smile at the teller. "I need to take a quick look at those forms. I think there's been a mistake." The teller hesitated, glancing at Sarah, who raised an eyebrow. "Matt, what are you doing here?" I froze. My cover was blown. Before I could think of an excuse, security was called, and I was escorted out of the bank. The loop reset before I could try again. The perfect plan, loop number 19. By now, I knew the routine by heart. I knew exactly where Sarah would be at every moment of the day. I decided to change tactics. If I couldn't stop her at the bank, I'd go straight for Derek. At 10 a.m., I waited outside Derek's office. As soon as Sarah left, I slipped inside, locking the door behind me. Derek looked up from his desk, startled. "Matt, what are you?" "Cut the act," I said, slamming my hands on his desk. "I know everything. The money transfers, the fake documents, all of it. You're going to hand over every piece of evidence, or we'll see how the police feel about your little scheme." For a moment, I thought he was going to deny it, but then he smiled. A slow, smug smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're too late. Even if you stop me, the others will finish the job. This isn't just about money, Matt. It's about power, control. And you were the perfect pawn." My blood ran cold. This went deeper than I thought. I left Derek's office, my mind racing. The conspiracy was bigger than Sarah, bigger than Derek, bigger than anything I could have imagined. There were more players involved, and I was just scratching the surface. But now I had something I didn't have before: leverage. I knew who some of the key players were, and I had enough evidence to start unraveling the whole operation. The next loop would be the most important one yet. It was time to set the ultimate trap and expose everyone once and for all. I stood in the dimly lit office, surrounded by the evidence I had spent countless loops collecting. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each passing second. Any minute now, Sarah and Derek would walk in, expecting this to be just another step in their plan. They had no idea what was waiting for them. I had memorized their every move, every word they would say. This time I was 10 steps ahead. The door creaked open. Sarah entered first, her heels clicking against the tile floor, followed closely by Derek. Their casual confidence turned to shock the moment they saw me sitting in Derek's chair, a stack of incriminating documents in my hands. "Surprise," I said, leaning back in the chair. "We need to talk." Part 4, The Ultimate Trap. I woke up on November 12th for what felt like the 100th time. By now, the shock and confusion were long gone. Every second of the day was etched into my mind. I knew what would happen, who would betray me, and when it would occur. I had failed enough times to know exactly what I needed to do. This was going to be the final loop, the loop where I ended everything. Step 1. Assemble the evidence. The first part of my plan was to collect every shred of evidence I had gathered from previous loops and bring it all together in one place. I knew I couldn't confront Sarah or Derek without undeniable proof. Otherwise, they would gaslight me like they had so many times before. I spent the first few hours of the day retracing my steps from earlier loops. The coffee shop. I recorded Sarah and Vanessa's conversation using a hidden recorder, capturing every detail about their plan. Derek's office. I made copies of the documents I had seen in previous loops, the forged signatures, the bank transfer forms, and the emails that outlined the entire conspiracy. The bank. I obtained proof of the transactions Sarah had initiated, showing the money trail that would incriminate them all. By noon, I had everything I needed. This time, I wasn't just guessing, I had hard evidence. Step 2. Recruit an ally. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone on the outside, someone I could trust. Unfortunately, after so many loops, I had learned that trust was in short supply. Almost everyone I knew had some role in this twisted conspiracy. But there was one person I hadn't tried yet, Detective Ryan Grant. In earlier loops, Ryan had investigated the strange occurrences around my business but never found enough evidence to act. This time, I brought him everything on a silver platter. At 2 p.m., I walked into his office and dropped a thick file on his desk. He looked at me with raised eyebrows. "What's this?" Ryan asked, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened as he scanned the documents. "Proof," I said. "There's a conspiracy involving my wife, my business partner, and a few others. They're trying to steal everything from me. I have recordings, documents, and bank statements. I need your help to stop them." Ryan leaned back, processing what he had just seen. "If this is real, this could blow everything wide open." "It's real," I said. "I've lived it too many times to be wrong." Step 3. The setup. By 5 p.m., everything was in place. I had arranged for Ryan to be waiting nearby with backup, ready to step in at the perfect moment. All I had to do now was play my part and lead Sarah and Derek right into my trap. At 7 p.m., I waited in Derek's office. I knew they would show up around 7:15 to finalize the next step of their plan. This was when they would sign the final documents that would drain my accounts completely. I sat at Derek's desk, the incriminating documents spread out in front of me. My heart pounded as the minutes ticked by. I had to stay calm. I had to stay in control. The confrontation. The door swung open. Sarah walked in first, her expression calm and composed, until she saw me. Derek followed closely behind, freezing in place when he noticed the stack of documents on the desk. "Matt," Sarah said, her voice faltering. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Sit down. We need to have a little chat." Derek glanced at Sarah, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is private business." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, tapping the stack of papers. "You've been stealing from me for months, forging my signature, transferring my money, and planning to disappear once it was all done. But the game's over. I have everything I need to prove it, and I'm not the only one who knows." Their faces went pale. "What are you talking about?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "You're being paranoid." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recorder, pressing play. The sound of her voice filled the room. "Once we move the funds, it's over. He'll never recover from this." The tables turn. Sarah's calm facade crumbled. Derek tried to grab the recorder, but I was faster, pulling it away. "Don't bother," I said. "Detective Grant is already on his way. In fact, he's probably listening outside right now." As if on cue, the door burst open, and Ryan stepped inside with 2 uniformed officers. "Sarah Johnson, Derek Hayes, you're both under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and embezzlement," Ryan said, stepping forward. Sarah's eyes filled with panic. "Matt, wait. We can fix this. You don't have to do this." But it was too late. As they were led out in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had finally exposed the truth. I had broken the loop. But at what cost? For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wake up on November 12th again. The loop was broken. But as I sat alone in the quiet aftermath, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The conspiracy went deeper than I realized, and there were still unanswered questions. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. The email had no subject, no sender, just a single line of text that sent a chill down my spine. "You think it's over, Matt? It's just beginning." Before I could even process it, my phone buzzed. Another message. "Meet me at the old warehouse. Come alone. You still don't know the full story." The loop was broken, but something far worse had just started. Part 5, Shadows of the Past. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I woke up on November 13th. The sunlight streaming through the window felt almost foreign after spending so many loops in the same day. It was over, or so I thought. The morning was eerily quiet. No cryptic conversations, no repeating events, no signs of the time loop returning. I made myself coffee, trying to let the reality sink in. Sarah and Derek were in custody. The conspiracy was over. My life could finally go back to normal. But deep down, something still felt wrong. The first warning. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was an email, no subject, no sender. Just a single line of text. "You only uncovered the surface. We're still watching." I blinked, rereading it several times. My first instinct was to dismiss it as a prank. Maybe someone heard about Sarah and Derek's arrest and thought it would be funny to mess with me. But something about the message felt too precise, too deliberate. I called Detective Ryan. "Hey Ryan, have you heard anything strange since the arrest?" "Strange how?" "Like messages, warnings." He paused. "No, but I wouldn't be surprised. These kinds of conspiracies always have more players than you think. We'll keep an eye on things. Just stay alert." Stay alert. Easier said than done. The warehouse meeting. Later that afternoon, I received another message, this time a text. It was short and direct. "Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street at 9 p.m. Come alone." My first reaction was to ignore it. I'd had enough danger for a lifetime. But curiosity gnawed at me. What if this was my chance to get the full truth? What if there were more people involved? People who had slipped through the cracks. By 8:45 p.m., I was parked near the warehouse. The building was old and abandoned, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. A single light flickered above the entrance. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. "Hello," I called, my voice bouncing off the concrete walls. A shadow moved in the corner. A figure stepped into the light. A woman in her late 30s, dressed in a black coat. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "Matt Harrison," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I've been waiting for you." "Who are you?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Someone who knows what really happened," she said. "You think Sarah and Derek were the masterminds? They were just pawns in a much bigger game." The revelation. Her name was Claire, and she claimed to be a former associate of Derek's. Someone who had helped set up the entire scheme but had a falling out with the group when things spiraled out of control. "They were after more than just your money," Claire said, her eyes locking onto mine. "They wanted to take you down completely, professionally and personally. But someone higher up orchestrated it all. Someone who knew how to manipulate people, pull the strings from behind the scenes." "Who?" I demanded. "I don't know their name," Claire admitted. "But I know they're still out there, and they won't stop until they finish what they started." The chase. Before I could ask more, the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Claire's eyes widened. "They found us," she whispered. "Run." We sprinted toward the back exit as the footsteps grew louder. My heart pounded as we burst out into the alleyway, narrowly avoiding a figure in a black hoodie who lunged at us. We didn't stop running until we reached my car. "Get in," I shouted, starting the engine. Claire slammed the door shut, breathing heavily. "You have no idea how deep this goes," she said between gasps. "If you want to survive, you'll have to be smarter than all of them." Ending Part 5. As I drove through the dark streets, my mind raced. I had thought the loop was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. But this was something else entirely. A game I didn't understand, with players I couldn't see. One thing was clear. The loop was gone, but the danger was far from over. And if I wanted to stay alive, I had to uncover the truth, before they caught me first. Previously, after breaking the time loop and exposing Sarah and Derek's conspiracy, Matt received cryptic warnings suggesting a deeper plot. He met Claire, a former associate of the group, who revealed that powerful forces were still hunting him. Now they're on the run, piecing together the larger conspiracy. Short spoiler introduction, peak tension. The engine roared as we sped down the dark streets. Claire sat beside me, scanning every side street and alley, her breath shallow and fast. "They're not far behind," she muttered, gripping the door handle. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A black SUV accelerated, closing the distance between us in seconds. "They've found us," Claire shouted. I clenched the wheel, my mind racing. There was no turning back now. If I didn't lose them, we were done. But what terrified me most was the growing suspicion that one of my closest allies had orchestrated this entire nightmare from the beginning. Part 6. The Hunt. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as we tore through the back streets of downtown. The black SUV loomed closer, its high beams cutting through the darkness. "Who are they?" I yelled over the roar of the engine. Claire glanced back, her face pale. "They're the real power behind everything. Bankers, investors, powerful figures who operate in the shadows. You were just a target on their list, and Sarah and Derek were the puppets they used to ruin you. How do they still know where we are?" Claire hesitated. "They always know. The ambush." The SUV swerved to block our path. I slammed the brakes, the tires screeching as we came to a stop inches from their bumper. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions cold and unreadable. Claire grabbed my arm. "Stay calm. We're walking out of here together." The men approached, their footsteps echoing in the still night. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, spoke first. "Matt Harrison," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble." "Who are you?" I demanded. He smiled faintly. "We're the people who gave Sarah and Derek their orders." "You thought this ended with them?" How naive. My heart raced as I scanned the street for an escape. There was none. "We can make this easy," the man continued. "Hand over everything Claire gave you, and we'll let you walk away. Fight us, and you won't live to see another day." Claire's hand tightened around mine. "Don't listen to him," she whispered. "He's lying." The escape. I didn't need to be told twice. I threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas. The tires squealed as we shot backward, narrowly avoiding the men. The SUV roared to life behind us, giving chase. Claire clutched the dashboard. "Head for the bridge. We can lose them there." The streets blurred as we sped toward the waterfront. The SUV stayed close, its headlights flickering ominously in the rearview mirror. "Faster," Claire urged. We hit the bridge at full speed, the city lights reflecting off the water below. The SUV surged closer, its front bumper nearly touching ours. Then, without warning, Claire reached into her coat and pulled out a small black device. She pressed a button, and the SUV's engine sputtered and died, its headlights flickering out. The vehicle coasted to a stop behind us. I stared at her in shock. "What was that?" "A little insurance," she said with a smirk. "You're not the only one who's been planning for this." The hidden truth. We pulled into a quiet parking lot on the edge of town, my pulse still racing. Claire leaned back in her seat, catching her breath. "They won't stop coming," she said finally. "But we've got something they don't: evidence. Enough to take down the entire operation." I frowned. "What evidence?" She pulled out a USB drive from her coat pocket. "This contains everything: the real names, the accounts they used to launder money, the network behind the conspiracy. If we can get this into the right hands, we can expose them all." I took the drive, turning it over in my hand. It felt strangely light for something that could change everything. The betrayal uncovered. As we sat in the car, piecing together our next move, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Detective Ryan. "Matt, I need to see you. Urgent. Come to my office." My gut twisted. Something didn't feel right. Claire, I said slowly, can we trust Ryan? She hesitated. I've worked with him before. He's good. But in a case like this, trust no one completely. I nodded, my mind racing. Ryan had been my ally since the beginning, or so I thought. But what if he wasn't? What if he was part of this all along? The final setup. We agreed to meet Ryan, but this time I was ready for anything. I hid the USB drive in the car and walked into the police station with nothing but my wits and a silent prayer that I was wrong about him. Ryan greeted me with a tired smile. Matt, thanks for coming. No problem, I said, trying to sound casual. What's so urgent? He gestured to a chair. We've got a new lead. Something you'll want to see. I sat down, watching him carefully. His eyes gave nothing away. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out nothing. His hand rested on the table for a moment too long, and that's when it hit me he was stalling. The door behind me creaked open. Footsteps. I turned just in time to see the man with the scar walk in, his cold smile returning. Hello again, Matt, he said. We have unfinished business. Ending part 6. I shot to my feet, adrenaline surging through me. Claire had been right. There was no one left to trust. The conspiracy wasn't just deep, it was everywhere. And if I wanted to survive, I had to outthink them all. The air in the room felt thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Ryan stood by silently, his eyes darting between me and the man with the scar. For a moment, I wondered if there was any part of him that regretted betraying me. But the cold, calculating expression on his face told me all I needed to know. He was part of this from the beginning. I don't have the drive, I said, my voice steady. But I've already sent copies of it to people who will expose everything. It was a bluff, a risky one, but it was the only card I had left to play. The man's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Am I? I crossed my arms, forcing a confident smirk. Go ahead. Take me out. But the second you do, everything on that drive will go public. Every name, every transaction, every dirty little secret. He hesitated, glancing at Ryan. Ryan cleared his throat. We need to be sure, he said. If he's telling the truth, we'll have a much bigger problem on our hands. The ticking clock. I knew I had only moments before they decided whether to call my bluff. My mind raced, calculating every possible move. Matt, the man said, stepping closer, his tone shifting to something almost fatherly. Think about this. You don't have to be the hero. We can make you rich. We can make all of this disappear. You'll live a better life than you ever imagined. I laughed bitterly. You think this is about money? You ruined my life. You took everything from me. There's nothing you can offer that will fix that. For a moment, we stared at each other in silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then, without warning, Claire burst into the room, a determined fire in her eyes. Claire's counterattack. I wouldn't do that if I were you, she said, holding up her phone. The file's already been sent to the press. It's over. The man with the scar froze. What are you talking about? Claire smiled. Check your email. The man hesitated, then pulled out his phone. His face darkened as he read the incoming messages. They know, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. This can't be happening. Ryan's phone buzzed too. His eyes widened as he saw the breaking news alerts flashing across the screen. Massive financial conspiracy exposed, names of high-profile figures revealed. The collapse. The room erupted into chaos. Ryan bolted for the door, but officers were already rushing in, their guns drawn. Freeze! One of them barked. The man with the scar turned to me one last time, his expression unreadable. You think you've won, but this is far from over. I didn't say a word as they dragged him away, his threats echoing in my ears. The aftermath. For the first time in months, or maybe years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally over. Claire stood beside me, her eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and relief. We did it, she said softly. It's over. I nodded, but deep down, I knew that things would never truly go back to normal. The people we had taken down were powerful, and their allies were still out there. But for now, at least I was free. One last twist. Days later, I sat in my living room watching the news. The conspiracy had become national headlines, and the people involved were being arrested one by one. My phone buzzed with messages of support from friends and strangers alike. Then, just as I was starting to relax, an envelope slid under my front door. Picked it up, my heart pounding. Inside was a single piece of paper with one line of text. Did you really think it would be that easy? Thank you very much for listening to this story to the end. I hope you liked. We work for you, looking for and telling you the most effective stories about women's betrayal, shocking intrigue, interweaving the plot and unexpected reactions of angry men. Save us, put likes, write comments, and, of course, subscribe to the channel to not miss any story.